All right, now can we do China now? We can do China?
I'm ready.
Welcome to Chinese news. It comes from China. 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 It's not racist at all, no.
Got a couple things from China. Obviously, very interesting weekend, and we'll get to that story. But before we do, I want to bring you this story from science.org.
Official.
Yeah, because science is truth, Basil. We already know about this. Dr. Fauci told us.
Science is truth.
So given that premise, the headline here, China bets big on brain research with massive cash infusion and openness to monkey studies. I like how they put that. They're just open to it, They haven't done anything yet. At least that's what you think when you read the headline. After 5 years of planning and debate, China has finally launched its ambitious contribution to neuroscience, the China Brain Project, CBP. Budgeted at 5 billion yuan, about $746 million. Under the latest 5-year plan, the CBP will likely get additional money under future plans, putting it in the same language as the U.S. Brain Research Through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies BRAIN initiative, which awarded $2.4 billion in its grants through 2021. And the EU Human Brain Project, budgeted at 607, I think that's pounds, 607 million pounds. It's about $585 million for the 10 years through 2023. The project, quote, is really on the move, says one of its architects, neuroscientist Mu Ming Pu.
Mu Ming Pu.
Mu Ming Pu. Look, I'm not here to make fun of anybody's cultures. Being,
how is it spelled? Do you have a spelling for us?
MU-MING. That's Mu Ming. Last name Pu. P-O-O.
It is P-O-O.
It is P-O-O.
Okay. All right.
Somebody should have told them to change it to U or something.
Nobody should have done anything, Gons. It's just two different cultures. It's a happy coincidence is what it is.
Or the American intelligence agencies thought that just go with the P-O-O. It's just better for us. It's more entertaining for us. Pu, head of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Institute of Neuroscience. The details of the project remain murky, but China's researchers, quote, seem to be building on their strengths, which is great, says neuroscientist Robert Desimone of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who accepts money from the Chinese government. That's not what it says. Who collaborates with colleagues in China. That's how they put it there. The CBP focuses on 3 broad areas: the neural basis of cognitive functions, diagnosing and treating brain disorders, and brain-inspired computing. Monkey studies will play a key part in the research, and project leaders hope the virtual absence of animal rights activism in China will help lure talent from overseas. Parentheses. Pu himself studied and worked in the United States for 40 years, including a decade at the University of California, Berkeley.
So that's a lifetime. So he spent his whole lifetime working for the U.S. or in the U.S.
And moved to China full-time in 2019. And then it goes into a little bit of the history of neuroscience. We don't need to necessarily
2019 is an interesting year because that's when...
2009.
Oh, 9.
Yeah,
okay.
Did I say 19? Sorry, 2009.
Yeah.
I meant 2019. Who will benefit most from the plan is hard to determine. Science, the magazine here, science.org, could not find any official announcements of the award to designated centers or grant recipients, and Pu declined to provide such numbers. Calls to China's Ministry of Science and Technology seeking information proved futile. Still, Desmond said it's clear that CBP, with its focus on treatment and basic work with primates, complements the US and EU schemes. The BRAIN initiative, I think it's into some of the history there. Let me get to the part here where it says China is already a leader in another CBP focus area, the development of disease models in monkeys. Pu's team made headlines in 2019 by combining cloning with gene editing to produce 5 genetically identical macaques. That's how I say it, like macaques. Sorry, macaques. Macaques. Macacus that lacked a key gene regulating the circadian clock. The cloning proved inefficient. The group used 325 gene-edited embryos and 65 surrogate females to create the 5 animals. But the gene deletion had dramatic effects. The animals exhibit sleep disorders, increased anxiety, and depression. Poo's group has also used gene editing to produce monkeys predisposed of Alzheimer's disease. Other ION researchers are developing techniques for crippling genes in monkeys to induce symptoms of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, says Stanford University neuroscientist Aaron Gittler, who studies ALS and has spent the past year on sabbatical at ION. Pooh intends to share his team's animal models, but because major airlines no longer carry non-human primates as cargo, researchers will have to visit the International Center for Primate Brain Research, which receives funding from the city of Shanghai and CAS and is not part of the CBP. The center is led by Pooh.
Pushing the limits. He's pushing the limits on really the state-of-the-art gene editing and other things.
The whole takeaway is, hey, they don't have the same kind of activists in China. In the US, you got all your animal activists, you got PETA, you got all these people knocking down at your door when you're trying to gene edit monkeys. So let's just go to China. They don't mind as much over there. The center is led by Pooh and neuroscientist Nikos Logothetis. I think it's interesting that Logothetis is in the name, who over the past 2 years moved most of his team from the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics after his lab was targeted by animal rights activists.
Biological cybernetics.
Mm-hmm. Max Planck Institute, too.
Yeah, Max Planck, obviously. The Max Planck Institute being a big part of that as well. Wow. So you got gene editing, you've got biological cybernetics, which can include 2 things. That can be building computers out of biological, like bodies or neurons or whatever, or implementing cybernetics into bodies.
Yeah. The quote from Logothesis, he declined to comment in an interview request, but he said, there is some, this is someone commenting on it, said, quote, there is some but not a lot of concern about animals used in research, but there is no animal rights groups focusing on this area, says Deborah Cow, an animal law and welfare expert at Griffin University, Nathan. Still, Chinese researchers are striving to, quote, replace, reduce, and refine animal experiments, says Ji Dai, a neuroscientist at CAS's Shenzhen Institute of Advanced Technology. Even in China, policies of handling animals are getting stricter, he says. So we'll see how it all plays out. Another question is whether political friction between China and the West will dent cooperation. Desimone sees little impact of life science collaboration at the moment, quote, but I don't have a crystal ball about international tensions in the future. And so there you go. China's got some stuff going on. They're taking American developed scientists to do their bidding.
Yeah.
But they can't share anything back because the geopolitical tensions between China and the U.S. are just so bad right now.
Well, knowing what we know now about the Confucius Institutes, the brain drain, the corporate espionage that China has been perpetrating for, about 40 years.
Yeah. Long time.
This Pooh fella, more than likely, there have been no indictments that I know of, but more than likely was siphoning off, American developments in these areas and feeding them to China.
100%.
And then was kind of called back in 2009.
Yeah.
And
the long game.
Yeah. Oh, they play the long game. They play it very well.
And that's not all, because NBC News, this is not some blog. This is not some weird Rumble video.
Yeah.
NBC News had this headline: scientists at America's top nuclear lab were recruited by China to design missiles and drones, report says. NBC News. At least 154 Chinese scientists who worked on government-sponsored research at the U.S.'s foremost national security laboratory over the last 2 decades have been recruited to do scientific work in China, some of which helped advance military technology that threatens American national security, according to a new private intelligence report obtained by NBC News. The report by Striders Technologies describes what it calls a systemic effort by the government of China to place Chinese scientists at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where nuclear weapons were first developed. Many of the scientists were later lured back to China to help make advances in such technologies as deep earth penetrating warheads, hypersonic missiles, quiet submarines, and drones, according to the report. I mean, come on, man. Deep earth penetrating warheads.
Yeah, all the coolest, fanciest science fiction war fighting technology developed in the U.S. and stolen by China. Again, this is great.
There you go. At least it's all being admitted now, which is very interesting. You can't really have a war unless you really have all of the dirty deeds laid out on the table.
Yeah.
You know? So I think it's really interesting that we're building that.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff was the purview of crazy conspiracy tinfoil hat people. And now it's just right there in the mainstream. That's always fun. That's wonderful. Now, speaking of tinfoil hats, we're not the only ones. The U.S., we are number one in tinfoil hats, but China's kind of sneaking up on us. They're trying to take that title as well. This is interesting. Some background, just a second of background, and the rest is explained. So we know, we've mentioned how Xi Jinping, the authoritarian leader of China, does technically have an election this year. And he wouldn't have an election except for he's using his power as the sort of sovereign of China to change the rules to allow him to, get elected again and basically be king of China forever. Yeah. It's a common pattern. China. Yeah, it's a common pattern. Interestingly enough, Putin did the exact same thing. So, Putin and China are friends. So maybe Putin's helping out with Xi Jinping's,
if anybody takes out G, I hope it's Pooh. Then you can have the Putin meeting. Oh,
yeah. So is there a Pooh and Putin connection there? That's the real question.
That's at the top of the show.
Well, let's head over to Newsweek. Now, Newsweek, as we know from the Harvard Media Lab document, which we refer to often, has mysterious funding, which kind of hints
funding,
What's that?
Unclear funding, the direct words.
There's some mysterious, unclear funding of the news network, which to us or to the discerning individual, it kind of connotes probably intelligence operation. So keep that in mind. The guy who co-founded International Business Times bought Newsweek. And in 2017, the company was rebranded as Newsweek Media Group. So it was International Business Times, too. Right, anyway. which also had some connections to intelligence operations. And just keep in mind, we talk about something called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, it's been around for quite a few decades, but then was revamped and modernized by Obama in 2013. And we've talked about how that works. And keep that in mind as we read from Newsweek, mysteriously funded news outlet. Here's the headline. Xi Jinping trends online amid coup rumors. Canceled flights. Chinese President Xi Jinping became one of the top trending topics on Twitter amid unsubstantiated reports he is under house arrest and that China is in the midst of a military coup.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, right. Xi and the phrase China coup trended on social media after tens of thousands of users spread unconfirmed rumors that the president was detained and overthrown by China's People's Liberation Army. Military coup guns, military tribunals, cleaning up the act, draining the swamp. It's very interesting connections to some similar election year conspiracy theories that were floating around the U.S. And if you haven't made the connection now, what we are reading is basically an exact carbon copy of what in the U.S. came to be known as QAnon. But now they're doing QAnon in China. It's the exact same storyline.
China coup, get it? Coup, QAnon. This speculation
which has not been discussed by any reputable sources, arrived as there are hardly any commercial flights flying over the capital of Beijing on Saturday. I think this is interesting. This also almost directly reflects a lot of QAnon stuff, because remember, when it came to, and I'm not calling every flight-based conspiracy theory QAnon, but if you remember a couple years ago during the election, some of the most popular sources of claims
about some
sort
kind of
conspiratorial claims come from flight tracking accounts. People who track flights, they track the FAA, they see mysterious planes with weird call signs taking off at weird times of night and flying here and there, and that fuels I will say it fueled a lot of the QAnon stuff during the election. Speculation, which has not been discussed by any reputable sources, arrived as there are hardly any commercial flights flying over the capital of Beijing on Saturday, with unverified reports claiming all trains and buses are also being canceled out of Beijing. Beijing Capital Airport's website does show that several flights out of China's capital have been canceled, but many others are still scheduled or already landed. There has also been reports the flights were canceled amid a planned military exercise.
Yeah, like that's any better.
Yeah, which is also, that's always been one of the explanations for a lot of the Q stuff too. A widely shared video posted on Twitter is also reported to show a line of military vehicles up to 80 kilometers long heading into Beijing amid reports of a military coup on September 22nd. However, the video is less than 1 minute long, so does not show if the line of military vehicles stretches 80 kilometers.
Thanks,
cool
Newsweek.
Fact check.
Thanks, Newsweek.
It's not long enough to see 80 kilometers. It is not confirmed when or where it was filmed, or that the convoy is heading into Beijing as part of a military coup. The rumor was also fueled by Indian politician Subramanian Swamy, who tweeted to his 10 million followers on Saturday, quote, "New rumor to be checked out. Is Xi Jinping under house arrest in Beijing? When Xi was in Samarkand recently, the leaders of the Chinese Communist Party were supposed to have removed Xi from the party's in charge of army. Then house arrest followed. So goes the rumor." In a series of tweets, Drew Thompson, a former Department of Defense official for China, Taiwan, and Mongolia, described the rumors as a complete falsehood. Now, again, in connection to the Smith Modernization Act, it was reported that over 700 of India's news websites were basically fake and were being used by intelligence agencies to put out information. And that's kind of the base, the foundation of how Smith-Mundt works, which is the U.S. can put out propaganda in foreign outlets and then report those foreign outlets on the mainland, and that's how you kind of launder information without sort of directly lying to Americans. You lie through an international outlet.
Right.
So, and it's usually India, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. And
so this was an interesting detail that all this started with an Indian tweet.
And also, just a side note, Saturday, which was September 24th. I don't know if you have recalled the September 24th, the 23rd, 24th usually is every year. There's a little bit of a something's going down.
There was a lot of that this year too. So a lot of speculation about the 24th of September. Some people were saying it had to do with Deutsche Bank. Some people had said, some German politician said something about the 24th of September. There's a lot of apocalyptic talk about the 24th of September this year.
Yeah.
Did you follow any of that? Because I didn't really.
I saw some posts on it. And I didn't really go down the rabbit trail, but it's always sort of the same thing every year. Yeah. But I'm just to point it out because it does confirm that bias. Like, oh, see, something went down. Xi Jinping, was taken out.
So the rest of this article is just kind of playing tag with quotes. It's like here's a quote from this guy. No, it's fake. It didn't happen. Here's a quote from this guy. Yes, it's kind of weird, huh? Perhaps it happened. And it goes back and forth about 4 times. But it does end the article with President Xi was recently at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, Leaders' Summit in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, where he held talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Maybe it was a Russian coup. Coup.
We got a coup, baby.
Coup.
And this has got so much attention for a lot of reasons, but I mean, there are outlets all over the internet trying to figure out if this is true or not. Of course, it would be huge if it was true, but it is so fascinating that they jumped on it so early.
Yeah.
Because we are sort of post QAnon. And as we know, it took the media 4 years, 5 years, something like that, to start reporting on QAnon.
It's probably a little less than that. I think it might have been about 2 years.
Maybe 3. Yeah, I was
2 or 3
thinking,
years.
yeah, something. Well, anyways. Yeah, so it's interesting how they jumped right on it, which is a little suspicious and makes me think that they're sort of being allowed to jump on it or something. Now, the print.in, another Indian outlet, has
example.
Here's an example of it. Here's how rumors of Xi Jinping's arrest and coup started. And it's a nice sort of dense article that basically sums it up that there was a Chinese defector?
Yeah, so this article says, this is the paragraph that I have highlighted here, the rumors started when a journalist named Zhao Lanjian, who is in exile in the U.S. after escaping from China, made unsubstantiated claims on Twitter about mass flight cancellations because of unexplained reasons. The claim was picked up by the Chinese spiritual movement, Falun Gong-backed media networks, including New Tang Dynasty, or NTD-TV, and overseas Chinese YouTuber Jennifer Zheng. The latter
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because if we're making the comparison to QAnon, as we
picked up by the spiritual people.
Yes, as we followed in its many forms, QAnon, there was Christian QAnon, there was New Age QAnon, there was Wiccan QAnon. The spiritual community was leveraged in its many different forms to really gain ground with the QAnon. So here with Puanon, it's very interesting that it's, again, not only is it basically a carbon copy of QAnon from 2019, but it's also using the exact same strategy to gain ground. And as we sort of pulled at the threads with QAnon, it seemed like something akin to a CIA PSYOP controlled by intelligence agencies. So, they're not the most creative folks. If they find something that works, they're just going to do it again.
Again, sports ball analogy. There's certain coaches and stuff that have come up with a system. If that system works, other people use it, and everybody knows who the originator of that system is. It's kind of like that. Yeah. You wouldn't understand. AsianMarkets.com also had it. China coup rumors squashed by state media. And I think this one had social media users, including respected Chinese economic and political observers, question the reason behind the cancellation of over 9,000 flights across China mainland. So it's just interesting how different outlets credit different people for starting the rumor. This one was respected Chinese economic and political observers, whereas the print.in was detractors. Journalists in exile. So it's just nobody knows for sure. And we're not even claiming to know for sure what went down. We don't know. We're not there.
Right.
But just looking at the media spin and reporting on this, especially since it came from Newsweek, and Newsweek using that good old 1984 doublespeak of like, no reputable sources have discussed this topic, except us. We are Newsweek, and we will give you the truth because no other reputable sources have discussed it. So,
well, even the very phrase "China coup rumors quashed by state media" is such a crafty way to get, it's like sticky paper to the QAnon type folks.
Right.
Because it's like, yes, if the state media denies it, it's true. And so you can really bolster a conspiracy theory simply by saying that, oh yeah, state media says it's false. So therefore, it's a very elegant system that they worked out with QAnon, but it's pretty obvious that it's just copy paste.
It is. I know. It's it's a strategy that works, and the algorithms probably told them, the religious people are the easiest ones to fool.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're targeting specifically in America and in China the same types of people that seem to have a religious or spiritual worldview.
Yeah,
so,
or at least the sort of alliance between intelligence or control apparatus and certain religious organizations.
Yeah.
We know, and we've seen documented ourselves, how governments ally themselves with popular religious organizations as a control mechanism. And so, if you have a message you want to get out, such as some sort of QAnon type psyop, all you got to do is call your buddies over at the religious organization, and you scratch their back, they scratch yours, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of the same thing we saw with Q.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. So we'll keep an eye out. We don't know. I highly doubt there's been a military coup of Xi Jinping. But as information becomes available, certainly we'll be bringing it to the show.